everyone, it's Jake at Jake's Metal Chat. Hope you're all well, and welcome to episode 24 of my Metal Vault. You know the drill by now. If you've been watching my series for a while, I will be exploring and showing you my favorite albums within heavy metal, thrash metal, death metal, black metal, doom metal, sludge metal, folk metal, you name it. All of that excellent stuff. And this album, no question, another absolute banger from the early 90s. It's a band that I've spoken about before, forming in Stockholm, Sweden in 1989 under a different name before changing it to the band that we know today. But this is going to be a band I know a lot of you out there, or most of you won't know. It's Epitaph, again from Stockholm, Sweden. And this is their 1992 debut, Seeming Salvation. What a quality album this is. Just how I like my death metal. I love my old school death metal. And before I chat more about this album, gotta show the artwork as per usual, but here's the CD. Here's a picture of the band. And of course show you the inside of the book, but before that, the artwork itself, which was done by, when I get up here, Christian. I'm not going to try to say his last name, but he's in a band currently, which I'm not going to try and pronounce because you know how my pronunciation skills are sometimes. But he used to be in Layers in Wait and Grotesque, which of course was one of the early one of the earliest bands that Thomas Lindbergh of At the Gates was in. So yeah, artwork and cool band picture right there. Show you a bit of, because there's a lot of this in this book, like talking about the days of the band. And get over here, we got lyrics, which is always good to see. Now, with the band itself, like I said, from Stockholm, Sweden, and when you think Stockholm, you think, the HM2 sound, with Entombed and Dismember, and you got Brave, like Swedish death metal in general, Entombed, Dismember, Brave. Right there. Unleashed. Bands like that. Edge of Sanity, another excellent band, which will be featured here at some point once I can find their stuff, because I can't seem to find it anywhere. Same with a lot of albums, really. I got this, I believe, at Scandinavia Death Fest in 2019. I could be totally wrong on that, but I know I got it somewhere. And this album was released originally on Thrash Records. This one's a re-release, so there's no uh bonus tracks in it. It's all original tracks. Of course, this was released by Dark Symphonies in 2018. So yeah, a reissue, repress. It's gonna probably be a lot of you watching. It's like, yeah, I got this when it originally came out. Of course, when this came out, I was just a young, very, very young child when this came out. So I missed a lot of that, what a lot of people would call, most people would call that golden age of the early death metal scene. And of course, this album came out at the time when, Morbid Angel, Cannibal Corpse, Suffocation, Obituary were all releasing albums, and other death metal bands releasing albums, and this would have just been one of those that got overlooked because there was more albums that came out in '92, such as The End Complete by Obituary, um, To the Mutilated by Cannibal Corpse. You know, the list goes on. Like those are just two of many brilliant albums to come out of death metal. So many more. I need to do a list on like what albums came out around the same time as albums that wouldn't have gotten the recognition at the time or did, just not as much as you would think. And how this album starts out, let's talk about the album. With the first track, it has that doom metal esque opening, and obviously the vocals are not the growls yet. It's more like the spoken, haunting spoken word type of vocals. Like you know when you hear it, and then straight into the title track of Seeming Salvation. You know, the drums and the solos, and then after that you got Pray to Dismay with a nice tremolo picking little technical part there. And throughout every song, very different in layers, and like how it starts out with the guitars and everything else. Everything's just excellent from all the instruments and the vocals. In my opinion, I love this album. And then, you know, so after Pray to Dismay, you get Engraving the Epitaph, another great song there. Same with The Twisted Grace, Self Inflicted, Purgation from Within, Disorientation, Seeking Life, and to end it all off, you got Of Violet Fire, which is just an epic sounding song. And you're probably thinking, hey, what? Swedish death metal, Stockholm, where's the HM2? Well, they never used it, as far as I know. Never used it. And you know what? I like the guitar tone on this album. Same with another album that I will be mentioning here in the vault because I've mentioned it before, and that is a band they've done a split with called Excruciate. And that's a great split if you have heard it, because it's floating about on YouTube, and I think you can get them both separately on their own. You can, and yeah, you can get them both separately on their own. The both sides of the split, either together or on their own. No, I've already said that, but and obviously the band had their first demo come out in 1991, which is one of the songs on this album. They split up in 1993, but got back together in 2015, released another album in 2016 called Sinner Waketh, which I've only heard maybe a couple of tracks on. I have not actually heard the whole thing itself. I've heard the whole thing of this, and it is just sick. Um, Before they were Epitaph, they were under the name of Dark Abbey from 1989 to 1990. Because there's also the split with the old name and this name called The Flesh Crawl Tapes 91, 92, which is going to be the Epitaph side. And then the Dark Abbey side will be Blasphemy. And they have a demo, obviously, which is Blasphemy. So they took the that demo from when they were called Dark Abbey, and then obviously all the tapes that they've, which I'm guessing would be from their demo Disorientation, put them together so you can hear two different sides of the band, because this is more just straight up death metal. Dark Abbey was more on the death thrash side. Of course, two different sides there, but both equally as heavy. Obviously, it's the same. It's been the same three guys they were since they were Dark Abbey, and then changing it to Epitaph, and they've been called Epitaph since 1990. So that's 34 years now since they've been under that name. But as a whole, as a band, they've been going since, well, for 35 years. You know, so 35 years as a band, but under this name for 34. And this album, like, it's been out since 92, and this has been going for 32 years because this came out in what, November of 92. So yeah, it'll be 32 years since this album was released, and it is an absolute banger that everyone should really give a good listen to. I highly recommend it. I mean, obviously, I love my Swedish death metal, but I've heard so much Swedish death metal. But the first things I obviously Entombed and Dismember and Grave and Unleashed, Edge of Sanity all had like HM2, especially like Dismember, Entombed, Grave. Unleashed, I think Unleashed used some HM2 in there. Yeah, I believe they used some HM2 in there. Edge of Sanity did, and then obviously nowadays there's so many different bands, not just Swedish bands, but bands here in the UK, America, Finland, Denmark, um, found a few in Norway, in places like France, Germany, Italy, Spain, Greece, um, Austria, just from all over the place, Australia, New Zealand, you name it. You'll find a band that has HM2, Chile, list goes on. Like I said, these guys and Excruciate, again, we'll be talking about. Never used the HM2, but I love the guitar tone regardless. They're a death metal band. They're still a Swedish death metal band. Regardless if they have that sound or not, they're still on that list of excellent Swedish death metal. And this album is a testament to that. You can't go wrong with a bit of Swedish death metal. And since I heard this album, the first song I ever heard was the title track. But then hearing the whole thing, I was like, it's probably like there's most people out there probably that never even heard this back in the day. There's probably a good half of that did, but a lot maybe didn't because it don't think was spoken about enough in various magazines and that. Maybe if you found like an underground fanzine back in the day, I think it would have been spoken about more than that because you had those hardcore fans who delved deeper within the scene and found albums like this. And how I found out about this album is just, going through YouTube and that, and found a list of death metal bands, and also this was one of the bands that showed up on that video, and I was just totally hooked from just that first part of Seeming Salvation. I was like, I got to check this band out a bit more, and and I was like, who is this band? And I found it as Epitaph, and then just went from there. Found this album, and for a while I was like, I'm never gonna find that album. It's like it's one of those rarities you never seem to find. But I found it, I heard it, and I freaking loved it. And I know there's most of you out there who have heard this and loved it as well. But there's going to probably be some veterans out there, or probably like never heard it back in the day, and are probably kicking themselves for not hearing it in the first place, or didn't think to look a little bit further from, that is that word comfort zone, thinking that, oh, I don't know, probably thinking that, so I'm just getting out of the way, probably thinking that, you know, I don't know, they really like thought about maybe there's more bands out there, and they just saw the bands that were coming out, and then I don't know, I'm probably just making assumptions at this point, but then obviously these guys had a massive following in their home country of Sweden, done shows. I'm not, I can't, I don't think I can find very much about the many gigs that they've done, but in the book here, just to get it out again, yeah, there's some posters from some shows they've done. So mentioning Dismember, they're right there. Edge of Sanity, and this goes on. Therian, and there's something there. Because as far as I know, so far they have not played outside of Sweden. Because obviously they did split up in '93 until 2015, so they got back together as a band 22 years after splitting up, and then release another album which I need to get, and that'll be my collection complete until they make a new album. Not sure they're making anything new. Who knows? See what this year holds. But as this album will be 32 years old in November of 1992. This came out in November of 1992. So November of this year, it will be 32 years old. So nearly 32 years of death metal right here. Yeah, just an excellent banger of an album and a timeless masterpiece. It's in that list. And I love that logo right there. It's really cool. And yeah, it'll be great to see these guys live. Hopefully, see them in the UK. And they just did a set where it was nothing but this album. Like I mentioned, it'll be 32 years since, 32 years in November that this album's been out. Again, let's see what this year holds, and get a drink in. Yeah, and this is why I do this series because I look in my list of CDs and vinyl and like here's an album that hasn't been spoken about a lot. There's only been spoken about like maybe a few YouTubers here, like few metal YouTubers. As like I said, it was one of those albums I to me would have gotten overlooked a lot back in the day, and in some cases still is. But if you are a death metal fan and you love, and I mean love, the underground scene, you love just straight up, in your face, old school death metal, be it, you know, European, British, American, whichever place in Europe, like be French, Italian, German, Austrian, Belgian, Dutch, um, further than that, Greece, Greek, Australian, Japanese, Chinese, Kiwi, you know, you know, bands from New Zealand, you know, as I mentioned, Kiwi. And you know, what further than that, go up to like further up here from the UK, go all the way up to Scotland. There's gonna be death metal there. There's death metal everywhere around here in the UK, up in Scotland, in Ireland, in Wales, Europe, again, France, Germany, Italy, Spain, Netherlands, Belgium, uh, you know, Netherlands, Belgium. I know I said those. I'm just trying to think of more countries. Slovenia, Slovakia, Czech Republic. Uh, Austria. You get where I'm going. Is if you love your death metal and you love more the underground stuff, and you've been finding more and more new bands, more in the underground, but you want to go further back, and of course, further you go further up, you go to Finland, you go to Norway, you go to Denmark, Sweden, you know, and you already know about bands like Entombed and Grave Dismember, Unleashed, and Edge of Sanity, and another band I mentioned, Carbonized, General Surgery, and another band I mentioned earlier who will be here, Excruciate. There's a band, there's one band, and obviously Carbonized you can find as well in that underground scene. Because you got all the newer bands, but there's a lot of those older ones that you might. I'm not too familiar with these guys. I'll check them out. These guys are definitely highly recommended by me and to those who have shown this album so far. I'm not sure how many. I'm fairly sure some of the YouTubers that have recently subscribed to me and I've watched their videos. Well, I know of one of them, he has. And, you know, just again, highly recommended. You love your underground death metal. Definitely one for you. It's it's a banger. It's excellent. And it is 100% an absolute timeless masterpiece. Remember this name right here. Give these guys your time, your support. Of course, everything will be down below to where you can find these guys. And let's see what the future holds. Who knows? They might be planning some shows this year. Might be planning some in the UK. Who knows? And when that day comes, I'm definitely gonna be right in, right in the action, right in the thick of it. And this album, definitely worth your time. Epitaph and Seeming Salvation. Excellent death metal. Just excellent Swedish death metal. Excellent death metal overall. Check it out. And that is it for another episode of my Metal Vault. I have so many more albums like that that came out in the early 90s, late 80s, early 90s. Because they're all going to be albums that have been overlooked. But like I said, it's probably a good chunk of people back in the day that would have heard that and bought it at that time. And there's probably those who, veterans at that time as well, who might have overlooked it and then found it maybe 10, 15, 20 years later. After it first came out. I'm like, where's that been? Like, where's that been all their lives? Like, where's that been all my life? I mean, who knows? You know, because we all know those really big albums, and those are excellent. Of course, this album, of course, Massacre. You know, from Beyond. No doubt about it. That's the next album, and I'll give you a hint. Um, Stuff by Grave, and of course, Demolition Hammer at the top. All three excellent bands with excellent albums, but definitely this one here is worth your time if you love and you are a full-on hardcore fan of death metal. Definitely, definitely check that out. And once again, thank you for tuning into this episode of My Metal Vault. There are so many more episodes to come. Got 4 more on this page to do. And then looking at the other page, I got 5. And then the next page after that, well, it's the same band. One's going to have 3 albums from the 80s, from, early to the early 80s, and then early mid 80s, and then late 80s to the early 90s, and it stops there. And there'll be more videos like that. Well, I'll just be talking about the whole discography of one band. But those albums need to have come out in the 80s and 90s. But then again, I might go into the early 2000s. Who knows? Anyway, before this video ends, if you are new to this channel and you want to keep up to date with everything that I have coming up, like this video, share it around, comment down below if you have anything on your mind. And most importantly, and this is the most important thing, do not forget to subscribe to, and I've said this already, to keep up to date with everything that I have coming up on this channel. And of course, I did a new chat with Ryan from Seven Doors, Graveghoul, Born Undead, Blood Rage. List of bands goes on, and I thought talk to that amazing dude about death metal and horror films. And then going from that into talking about an underrated classics such as Epitaph, Seeming Salvation. Once again, check it out. I've been JK Jake's Metal Chat. Keep that banner of metal held high, and I will see you all in another episode of My Metal Vault.